Hello, how you doing and welcome back to the channel. Was the 2023 Six Nations the best Six Nations ever? That's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. I've seen plenty of people suggest that that is the case. In my opinion, it's not, and I'm going to explain why, but I am going to entertain the possibility that it could be. I'll go through the reasons why it could be, and also the main reason, pretty much one big main reason why I don't think it is. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. Would always appreciate that, and drop a comment down below. Do you think the 2023 Six Nations was the best Six Nations ever? All right, let's get into it. So I want to start off with why it could be the best Six Nations ever. And first of all, number one is attacking rugby. If you like your attacking rugby, and I think in this day and age, pretty much everyone does, then this had the most tries scored in any Six Nations. 91 tries in 15 games were scored in this Six Nations, and that beat the previous best, which was the 86 scored in 2021. I think attacking rugby is on the up. I think tactically we've moved away from the period when England were actually probably more successful, when it was all about kicking, all about being really physical in defence, and we didn't necessarily see as entertaining a games as perhaps many people would have wanted. So I think attacking rugby at the moment, with Ireland, with France, with Scotland, and even though they didn't win a game, the success that Italy have been having, it is about teams that are able to attack, that are able to punch holes in opposition defences, are the teams that, for the most part anyway, are able to have success, and that's reflected in the amount of tries being scored at the moment. So attacking rugby, for me, big plus this Six Nations. Also, number two, in terms of why it could be the greatest Six Nations, all-time great team or teams, because I would include Ireland and France in this category. I mean, this Ireland side, as I've already said on the channel, for me, probably since England in 2003 is the best Grand Slam winning team we've seen. I think they're that good. And in terms of their legacy, we'll wait and see what happens at the World Cup later this year. That's really where they'll be able to catch that 2003 England team. But I think since 2003, this has been the most comprehensive, the most dominant Grand Slam that we've seen. And I think Ireland are an all-time great team. Also, I think France could be put in that category as well. You look at that game in Dublin, which I will come on to in just a moment, but you look at how France are playing at the moment. In the first couple of games, they weren't even thought to be that near their best. They then went away to Twickenham, had a record victory there, would have just been excellent, really. And you look at Ireland and France at the moment, that is the main rivalry, really, in terms of quality in this Six Nations at the moment, and they are two brilliant teams, particularly with France doing the Grand Slam the year before, Ireland winning it this year. That is a great little rivalry that I think is bubbling away at the moment. My next point is competitiveness, and even though there clearly is a gap between France and Ireland at the moment, I think a lot of fixtures felt closer than we probably expected. I think that's probably fair. I mean, there's a few exceptions in there. I know Ireland-Wales in week 1, obviously England against France in week 4, but you think of a lot of the other games, even Ireland and Scotland, that was close up until half-time. Scotland against Wales as well up at Murrayfield was close up until half-time before Scotland pulled away. And a lot of those games involving Italy, when they were at home against France and against Ireland, when they were away against Scotland where they came back into it, I think we've seen a competitiveness in the games this Six Nations, which hasn't always been the case. I don't think there have been too many games which we could just write off as being done by about the hour mark. Teams were able to come back into games, and teams were able to keep it tight in particular. And Italy deserve quite a lot of credit for that, really, because they're often the ones who traditionally were getting points put on them. But they were a lot more competitive despite losing all of their games. The final point for why this could be one of the best Six Nations ever is an all-time great game. And that is round 2, Ireland against France in Dublin. I'm going to come back to this in just a moment, actually, ironically, but I saw Owen Slot in the Times said that it was in kind of his top 5 Six Nations matches that he has ever seen. Plenty of people looking at that. And you do look at the quality of those two teams at the moment, certainly in terms of the Northern Hemisphere, when we've got the number 1 and number 2 ranked side in the world. That's pretty much unprecedented, I believe, for the Six Nations. The Six Nations has always been a brilliant tournament, but it didn't necessarily always have the best sides in the world. That traditionally was the Rugby Championship. At this current moment in time, it's the two best sides in the world rankings, and the quality that they produced in that game in Dublin was absolutely sensational. It had pretty much everything you could ask for. So an all-time great game. Those are a few different reasons why this could be considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Six Nations ever. But I don't think it is. And why not? In all honesty, I have less points in the no, but for me, they are significant ones when it comes to this conversation. And my biggest reason is Super Saturday wasn't really that super. There was a lack of jeopardy, I thought, towards the end of the tournament, heading into that final weekend. We were pretty much all just waiting to see if Ireland could win the Grand Slam against England, which we all expected them to do. England made it a little bit tighter for the opening half an hour or so, but then ultimately Ireland were just too good and pulled away. I didn't think there was kind of that dramatic climax to the tournament that we have had in previous years, particularly if you want to compare it with 2015 as an example. And I think this Ireland side would comfortably win the 2015 Six Nations if you were to pick them up and drop them into it. But if you look at that one, it came into the final weekend with Ireland, Wales and England all within a chance of winning the championship. One played first, then the next one, they were kind of leapfrogging each other, and it came down to that absolutely bonkers game at Twickenham. What was it, 55-35, England beat France, but they just missed out to Ireland on points difference. That was a Super Saturday where there was so many different outcomes. You're having to get your calculator out to work out where teams were in terms of points difference. It was so exciting, and I just think we lacked that this Six Nations. And on the one hand, you could throw at me, well, it's just because Ireland was so good. Ireland had beaten everyone before them, and then they came up against an England side who we all know aren't that great at the moment. So, it's a reflection of how good Ireland are. But I think if for a tournament and for the Six Nations to truly be considered the best ever, you need that drama. You need that moment where we all just can't believe what we're watching. And I don't really think we had that. If you disagree with me, do drop a comment down below though. And in a shame, one of the final things I'll say on this, it's kind of just a shame of how the fixtures worked out, which is another reason you could throw at me for why it's not a decent excuse. But that Ireland-France game just came too early in the tournament. Imagine if that was Super Saturday. And I know you don't know how things are going to play out, but I think it was a shame really, because we all kind of watched that game after week 2, and whoever won that game, it would have taken quite an upset for them not to go and win the championship, I think. And that brings me on actually to another point, which I didn't put on the graphic, but where were the upsets? I think the only one technically that was an upset was Scotland beating England at Twickenham in week 1. And even that game, I think most people would say it was a bit of a 50-50, or even would have had Scotland as favourites because of how England had played in the kind of last months of 2022. There weren't the upsets. We had good games, we had competitive games, as I've mentioned, but we didn't have an upset. We didn't have enough upsets, I don't think. And then the final point that I did want to mention was Wales and England. They're just not at their best at the moment. And you could kind of say that, all right, well, there's always teams in the Six Nations that are a little bit below the others. Previously, it might have been Italy and Scotland. Wales and England aren't in a great place. But I also just think in terms of where the games are off the field in Wales and England, in terms of what's happened behind the scenes in Wales with the players' pay, with all the allegations at the union, what's happened in England in terms of the domestic game and the crisis that is kind of happening there, plus then the performances we're seeing by those two sides, which are two great rugby nations. There's a little bit of apathy, particularly I think in Wales at the moment, and England, well, I think actually the fan base kind of got more behind this team than they had been previously, but there's just something missing, I think, from those two nations. If they were just a little bit better, I wonder whether it could have really enhanced this championship. So those are my general views. I don't think the 2023 Six Nations was the best ever. I've outlined why in this video. You let me know in the comments. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Drop a comment down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.